Why do you ask? No reason.
Good morning, everyone. We are live, and we have our special guest, Jim Coda, waiting in the waiting room. And we apologize that this wasn't broadcast to the YouTube channel where everyone was waiting last time, but we're not going to waste time talking about that. Jack Gescheit of the Tree Spirit Project is here. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do our little format of a little bit of news and rancher quote of the week, and then we will move into the main topic today, and that's taking advantage of having a retired environmental attorney, Jim Coda, who has actually worked closely on Point Reyes issues in the past, to shed light on some of the things that have been coming out in the news. Jack, you can tell us more about Jim, right?
I will. I do want to introduce Jim, our guest today, and give him his due. But there is one other guest you forgot to mention, who is wrapped around your shoulders, Skylar. Who is that? Would you introduce us?
That's Wolf Bear.
So you have a live dog around your neck. I thought it was part of the microphone, but it's actually a dog. That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So the human guest we have on today, who will be talking more than Wolf Bear the dog, is
Hope so.
I'm actually going to give him his due and read a longer bio, because this guy is somebody I've gotten to know as a friend, but he's been all the while for years now a font of information and knowledge. And in these areas, he is a retired attorney. He now spends his time photographing wildlife in his retirement. And a lot of that time is spent in Point Reyes National Seashore when he's not taking trips to Yellowstone and such. But before he retired, he worked 35 years as an attorney in the federal government. Started in the DOI, the Department of Interior, out of D.C., and working on legal matters for the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. It's management of public lands. So he is, for us laymen, quite the expert on public lands management, including inside Point Reyes Seashore, where we're concerned. Then he went to work for the Interior Department's San Francisco legal office, where he specifically handled cases representing the Park Service, which is interesting since my coming to this issue in the last few years has been the Park Service is kind of the enemy. We're opposed to them. We want them to fix up their policies regarding ranching at Point Reyes. And then he ended his career as an assistant U.S. attorney with cases challenging the way federal agencies in California manage lands and resources under laws like NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, which we still use until it's gutted by the Trump administration as a lever of power to get them to do the right thing for the environment, as opposed to for the cattle industry, say. So that's a lot of ado, but that is Jim Coda, retired attorney who's with us today and can talk all things Point Reyes, as we will do.
In short, it's not just some hippie blabbering.
Yeah, that'd be me with my fleece jacket. Yes, and you with your dog scarf.
Yeah, I hope I'm not offending anyone by the fact that this animal isn't dead and wrapped around me as a decoration.
Nor are you using him as a commodity animal for profit, draining his milk.
No, when I will, I use my animals thoroughly so that no one can be upset. When I do eat him, I'm gonna use every last part of him. In the news,
I don't know whether this is a good way to bring in Jim into this, whatever you and I do.
I have a way to bring him in.
Okay, great. Because there's an issue here, and I don't know whether people are seeing how this tightly coordinated show actually works behind the scenes. Do we bring Jim in and then introduce kind of our topic for the day, the big news that's happened in the last, week with Point Reyes, or do we want to discuss it now? What do you think?
I don't know. We'll, if you don't cut me off again, we'll get right to it.
Well, that's not going to happen. I am going to cut you off again. It's what I do.
So in the news, I was reading that small farms are being hurt by Trump's new economy. And yet we have just saturating the news here in the Bay Area, how the ranchers are being hurt, or the ranchers in Point Reyes. This same administration is going to investigate the secret deal that took place during the Biden administration, which, is trying to paint it as some sort of evil, liberal, hippie, environmental thing that was done illegally. But that raises a couple of questions that I want people to think about, have those in the back of your minds. How is it? What is it about these ranches in Point Reyes that's different from the small farms that are being hurt by Trump's economy? And then these people are getting special treatment. While some farmers and ranchers are being hurt, these people are getting special treatment by having a special committee actually investigate a deal that the ranchers are whining and complaining about. To me, not to insert an idea into your mind, but these ranchers here are actually quite rich and quite powerful, as evidenced by the fact that they went to Washington and had their voices heard, just like that.
So the news, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Speaking of wealthy, we come to the quote of the day from Bill Nyman, who supposedly fears for the future of Point Reyes. And the Chronicle referred to him as a legendary beef rancher. And he went on, much like Strauss did, talking about, oh, you're going to lose your stewards of the land, which, of course, is comical to us who have been going out there and actually documenting the situation in Point Reyes, because I would say that these guys are anything but stewards. They actually make their money by abusing the land and turning native habitat into commodity crops and commodity feed for livestock. And they also do things like this example, just have landfills out there, massive landfills. So, and you felt like you wanted to, here are a couple other examples. I'm just going to throw these up on the screen. When Neiman or Nyman, remind me, is it Neiman or Nyman? Nyman. When he talks about losing the beauty and the essence that the ranchers have provided, you're talking about losing things like this. That's what they've reduced what was once diverse habitat. Oh, and the person who I was actually sent the Chronicle article that we, of course, have already seen many times, but they're saturating the news to such an extent that people who know that I'm working on this but don't really talk to me about it are like, oh, wow, did you see this? It's bad news if we lose the ranchers. And then they went on to say, oh, coyote brush must be evil, the way that they were talking about it in this article. And so the reality is that coyote brush is essential to wildlife, almost 200 species off the top of my head. But that doesn't benefit the ranchers, because they'd rather turn everything into an area where they can feed their cattle grass, such as, what sadly happens with deforestation. Trees are literally chopped down because they see more value in turning that into grass, not even native grass, non-native European grass. And Neiman says, even if you have a couple of deer and elk on that land, you're still going to miss the scenic landscape that we ranchers have provided. So I want you to look at this. That is a bull elk who has, that was captured, I got this shot in ranchland. That's what ranchland looks like. So the only thing attractive on ranchland is when an elk walks through it. And here's a picture of an elk trying to get back to where the native habitat is actually surviving. Why? Because ranching isn't taking place there.
So for those people who are driving and can't see, Skyward is showing pictures of basically kind of dirt fields, which used to be pastures, and they're, destroyed by cows. And although I appreciate and practice sarcasm and sardonic, bitter humor, as you've been doing, the point is, to put it plainly, is I would say, in this era of the Trump big lie and Trumpism, the ranchers are really doubling and trebling down on their mythologies that they are stewards of the land, when in fact, as Skyward is showing another picture here of a dump site on a ranch, they are really, well, my little constant quip is sewers on the land, dumping not just, rusting machines into a national park and dump pits, which the Park Service doesn't regulate, but we activists do. Either Jocelyn Knight and Liz Dodge and folks like that, who are part of our contingent of environmental activists, go out there and document stuff just in the park. So it just takes such a mitigated ball, or as I would say from back east, chutzpah, to say we're stewards of the land, and oh my God, I fear for the health of the Point Reyes seashore, when they are just bar none, by far the most destructive force in the seashore, the greatest source of land degradation, land desiccation, land pulverization, water contamination, and of course, methane gas emissions, while they're talking about the regenerative carbon sequestering and seaweed for Albert Strauss's farm and all that such. They are just a blight on the land. And I really encourage people, my final say here in my tirade is to go out and visit Point Reyes for yourself and look at the ranch areas. And you can just, it's plain to see once you look for it, that it's even on a green day like today, on a April day, when the hillsides are still green before they turn brown in the next month or two, they're just devastated by the cattle industry. Thousands of cows destroy the land. End of story.
So I'm sure we'll get to this with Jim, but there's one I want to make sure that we cover this part. When it's portrayed as this secret deal that was hatched during the Biden administration, I want people to understand that none of us knew. It's not like environmentalists knew and no one else did. None of us knew except for the ranchers and the people who were negotiating the deal. So it really bothers me that journalists are portraying this as the ranchers getting blindsided. They were participants in this deal and voluntarily signed to get paid for the second time millions of dollars to leave a place that they already got paid to leave once.
Right. It's not a secret deal. It's a confidential deal, which all deals are, or many, many, many deals are. That's how you negotiate, is not in the public view, but between all the parties who are all involved in it, of course.
I got distracted. I'm sorry. I'm actually watching a coyote on the mountainside right now from where I'm sitting.
Where are you?
I'm in Tahoe, Donner, and I was just thinking how sad it is that this is a rare occurrence. Like, I don't see wildlife even in the national park. Anyway,
hey, Jocelyn's here. Jocelyn's here. Good morning, Joe. We're going to bring Jim in just a moment. We're going to stop blabbing, but Jocelyn, good to see you, hear from you, and thank you for your Jocelyn Knight, a wonderful photographer and activist who was working with Marty Griffin for quite a while, and just one of the many people who's put a ton of time in and love and energy. I just want to go on this, that, you know, people can make a difference. The average citizen, with whatever skills they have, can get involved in these issues, and we need to be involved again in even the Point Reyes issue, to counter the narrative that the ranchers put out that they're doing good things for the land, when it's quite the opposite. And good morning, Liz. You're driving. Thank you, Corinne, with Andy over her shoulder, I guess, and Paula. Thank you all, and Sledge. Thank you all for being here this morning. We see you now. So we're
there,
up
I threw the overlay up on the screen, and we should let everyone know that we're going to stick strictly to talking to Jim and taking advantage of Jim answering questions. So I know some people in the chat just know that we're not really going to entertain side topic conversations that much today, because of the special opportunity to have someone who is an absolute wealth of knowledge. And with that, shall we bring Jim in?
Jim Coda, retired attorney, 35 years experience with the federal government, the Department of Interior, the National Park Service, legal affairs for the Bureau of Land Management, representing National Park Service. Yeah, and now retired, and has been investing years of his time in trying to clean up Point Reyes and have it realize its original founder's goal, which was to make it a national park devoid of any polluting industry, certainly free of the cattle. Yeah, thank you. Jim Coda, please bring him on in.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
All right.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. We see you with, those are your photographs behind you on the wall there. Yes, your wildlife.
Yeah. Some photos.
Wonderful.
My trips around the world.
So you've been hearing us blather on. I can just be quiet and let you make a comment, or I can give you a question. Which would you prefer?
Question.
So do you have an immediate response to get us to just jump into the letter? Apparently that was, I'm looking at the Press Democrat. I keep turning my head to look at it to get the facts right. That Strauss apparently led a group of ranchers, including Bill Nyman of Nyman Ranch, Strauss of Strauss Family Organic Dairy, to the House Committee on Natural Resources, which is Republican controlled, but the leading Democrat on that committee is Jared Huffman, who's now switched over to our side of this issue. Bless his heart, in my world, although other people resent it for having taken that long. But basically saying, hey, investigate, do something. It's terrible what's happened at Point Reyes with the negotiated settlement that all sides signed on to. And they have agreed to, yes, investigate the secret nonsense word. It's confidential. The agreement. Do you have any opinion to that which has transpired, Jim?
Well, probably only that I don't see the committee going anywhere of any importance. And I think it was quite helpful that the ranchers finally signed a couple of letters saying that don't mess with the settlement. We freely agreed to it. But that doesn't stop Bill Nyman and Dave Evans and Strauss from trying to convince the committee to somehow require that ranching continue after the current ranchers leave. But I don't see how that can happen with the agreement that was signed by everybody, including the Park Service, and blessed by the court. It would require going back to court with everyone that was a signatory to the agreement, trying to convince Judge Chesney to put the settlement agreement and her order in the paper shredder.
Is that how it works, Jim? They have to go back to the judge presiding over this case? Is that
Yeah, it was a settlement that was reached during litigation, and the court approved it. So I don't see it going anywhere. As I said, maybe I don't know if they'll hold a hearing or hearings, but I just don't see it going anywhere. And furthermore, even if they'd have to pass legislation somehow requiring that ranching must occur where it occurred for the past many decades. And I don't see that happening. I don't see them getting 60 votes in the Senate for sure to require ranching when the ranchers all agreed to end ranching. And I don't think the Democrats would ever agree to such a thing, especially with Barrett Huffman now in full support of the agreement between the Nature Conservancy and all the ranchers.
So just a layman's concern, again, from a layman's perspective, oh no, this letter is going to get to the House. Well, it has gotten to the House Republicans, and then they can get it up to the Trump appointed Department of Interior, which presides over the National Park Service. For those who don't know, that much I know, and quote unquote, blow up the deal, which is a non-legal term for, hey, I'm worried what they could do. But you're saying it's a long, lengthy legal process involving the passage of laws. They can't just reach into a deal that exists outside of their purview.
Yeah, I don't see any way that this is going to be successful for Nyman and Evans, but we'll see where it goes.
Okay, because what's his name? Huffman actually said, I'll find the quote while Skyward jumps in here, but he actually said, yeah, they could blow it up if they wanted to, and then maybe he was just doing it kind of in general to get people to pay attention to this so we don't fall quiet. I see it as a constant public relations war between the two factions.
I wondered why he put that the way he did when I read it, because he basically said the ranchers, if they want to back out, they can, and that's okay with me. I don't see how they can back out. They signed a contract basically that obligates them to leave, assuming the TNC pays them some money. And in order to, they couldn't just back out again without going back to court and undoing the settlement and getting the judge's approval. I just don't see the thing coming unglued or falling apart.
So I wanted to point out that a couple of ranchers didn't sign the deal, and some who did sign the deal voluntarily, this is not gunpoint, they negotiated this. Even some that signed the deal and are about to get paid millions of dollars went out of their way to cry and complain about it. And I wanted to have Jim talk about the status before the Nature Conservancy settlement came in, that the ranchers were very likely going to lose another litigation battle that was taking place because of all of their offenses, all of their violations. And yet here we have, it was this settlement to me is a great escape route for unsustainable businesses that are shutting down, not just in Point Reyes, but shutting down in other areas of Marin and Sonoma, et cetera, because of climate change, because of drought, because it's not sustainable. And here's an opportunity to get paid millions of dollars again, and they have land and other businesses and other ranches outside of the seashore, so none of them are hurting. They're just going to reinvest the money in their other businesses, I would think. But I just thought it was funny that they are really, really banking on this woe is me thing, and people are buying into it. People are just gobbling up this, oh, the poor ranchers, when in fact they voluntarily signed a deal. And in the case of Kevin Lundy in particular, and there was another one, we're at the town hall and have been in all kinds of publications doing the, oh, woe is me thing. So what is going on there, Jim, when people sign a deal and then go cry about the deal?
Well, I don't know. They just want to have their cake and eat it too. They were against any attempt to reduce or shut down ranching, and the TNC came in and laid a golden egg for each of them, and they can't quit. Well, I don't know about all of them. Kevin Lundy did at that town hall complain a lot about the situation, but he did voluntarily sign the agreement to take some money and leave. So I don't know. I think. I don't know that the other ranchers would have said what he did, but it's history. They, including Kevin Lundy, have all agreed to leave, and under the deal they struck with the Nature Conservancy,
except for a couple who didn't sign it and aren't leaving.
Yeah, I don't know why the parties didn't try to bring
Dave Evans,
Bill Nyman, and Dave Evans into the settlement discussions. It's like no one made an effort to do that, and they didn't bother to do it. But why? I don't know. If they had signed this under the settlement and with some terms with the Nature Conservancy, we wouldn't have this most recent lawsuit, which even though I don't think it has a prayer in hell of succeeding, is at least something for everyone to be aroused about, and it's kind of in not coordination, but similar to what the House Natural Resource Committee is doing right now. Everyone complaining about the settlement agreement.
And Jack, I'll stop after this one, but I know this is a simple point, but it's a point people need to understand, that this was not secret. In fact, well, we didn't know, but the ranchers did know. And because the news is absolutely saturated with it. And I wanted to share the Google search results. When I put in ranchers create a landfill in Point Reyes, what I got was these results that were leading me to articles about, oh, the poor ranchers. I mean, these are the Google results I got. Legendary California beef rancher fears for Point Reyes. House committee investigating secret deal to I mean, it's like it's like actual search results are being manipulated and it's not helping when our local publications aren't reporting accurately about it.
So thank you.
And to our viewers, if you do want to type some questions for Jim in the chat, because it is a special opportunity to have him here. Some specific questions that you have about this deal and what's going down, we can read those to Jim.
So two things, and then I want to do something that you suggested we ask Jim to do, which is to do kind of, if he can. I'm going to say this, Jim, and then give you a few minutes to ponder while I prattle on a bit. And that is kind of a list of everything, in your opinion, your professional opinion, all the violations that the ranchers, perpetuate in Point Reyes Seashore. But just 2 points for anybody who's listening to this. When you did that that's a great idea, is to Google search, stewardship of the land or pollution in the park. You actually explain why, Skylar, that the ranchers are doing what they're doing right now, which is you go into searches and Point Reyes Seashore. Well, this is the news that's going on right now. And it's their narrative of a so-called secret deal, which is a confidential deal, and the House Republicans do the thing. And so that jumps. It's not an algorithm rigging. It's how algorithms work. These are the latest stories, so they jump to the top of the list. Versus if you say, cattle pollution at Point Reyes Seashore, there are fewer hits on that. Those narratives are only driven by us activists who are driving the truth of it. But the 2 points are, this is what the public doesn't know. So I see it as our job, and for me as a PR person, polemicist type, to have the average person understand that the ranches at Point Reyes Seashore are the number one source of pollution in the park: land, water, and air. And then also, which is going to lead me into asking Jim to elaborate a little bit on what I'm going to say, they also, people don't know, are getting millions of dollars of subsidies for their super cheap, under market value leases. They don't own the land. They sold it years ago, got millions of dollars. They're just leasing land in the park, violating rules and benefiting to the tune of millions of dollars every year. They're welfare ranchers, although I don't like to badmouth the term welfare, which is appropriate for poor people, but not for wealthy ranchers. People don't know these things. They're getting supported by public taxpayers and fouling the park that they're getting this cheap deal on. Jim, do you have anything to add to that, or more violations that you're aware of that these ranchers perpetuate on our national park?
Well, this is probably a good question to ask someone that's an expert on natural resources like Laura Cunningham. But I mean, ranching and farming in general, I mean, I don't care if you plow a farming area and plant it with corn or wheat or whatever, that removes whatever was natural there that was habitat for wildlife. It just changes something that was run by nature to something run by man for profit. And at Point Reyes, the coastal prairie, some people think the coastal prairie is still there and ranching is helping preserve it. The coastal prairie disappeared when cows got there. They loved the bunch grasses and overgrazed them so much they died out. And that was very unfortunate because basically bunch grass has roots that go 6 or more feet down into the soil, and for that reason, the bunch grass stays green virtually 12 months a year, not like the carpet grass that we have out there now, European non-native grass that has roots that go down just
Jim,
6 inches.
Jim,
die.
How frustrating is it to see the ranchers get credit for carbon sequestration of their annual grasses, their shallow annual grasses, when their cows have actually destroyed the ones that could have actually successfully sequestered carbon with their deep roots and are perennial and stay green most of the year, instead of turning into the fire fuel that we also simultaneously say, oh, we need the cattle to fight the fire fuel, which in fact this industry is responsible for.
Yeah, well, cattle emit a tremendous amount of carbon and methane, I should say, which is a big polluter of our atmosphere. And the grass is far less important for carbon sequestration than forests. That's been very unfortunate that in Brazil, so many thousands of acres of forests have been cut down to provide grass for cows, for beef to be shipped partly to the U.S., by the way. I think we have enough beef produced in the U.S., so we don't need to buy it from Brazil. But, the coastal prairie is gone, except for a couple of little areas where cows have never gotten to in the seashore. And, one hope we have is that the Nature Conservancy and the Park Service, and maybe with us volunteering and advising, can get some of the coastal prairie back where cows have destroyed it. Hopefully, ultimately, and this would be way after all of us are 6 feet under at the bottom of those few bunch grass roots that might exist out there. It's going to take forever to do that, but ultimately, it's hopefully somewhat possible. But right now, those 100% grass areas out there provide habitat in the way of food for cows and elk. Otherwise, it provides no food or cover for anything, basically. Although gophers and ground squirrels, if we still had them, they were wiped out at Point Reyes and many other places, would also use those grassy areas and provide some possible food for predators. But for a rancher, they don't like coyote brush. They don't like trees because they want grass in place of those things. But those are the things that provide habitat for birds, mammals, reptiles, everything.
allow me to jump in for a second, because I'm looking at the San Francisco Chronicle, just repeating without vetting any of the information, everything Bill said. And it says, Bill has lived through a lot of changes since he first started ranching in Point Reyes in 1969. And what especially irks him is seeing areas choked with coyote brush that were once grassland dotted with cattle. People just, you need to pick a side. Like, are you on the side of nature, or are you on the side of destroying nature for the sake of ranching? Because you want to, as Jim has said, you want to have your cake and eat it too, but there's a dividing line. Ranchers get rid of nature for their commodities. It is no longer nature. You're fed a line that they work hand in hand, but it is not true. And we have endless examples of ranchers actually complaining about the presence of nature. And then they turn around and get to be called having some sort of a nice marriage with nature, or stewards of the land. And I'll finish his quote and then move on. That's how quickly the land can go back, Neiman says, co-founder of the sustainable meat company, Neiman Ranch, which is also not true, but sounds good. As he drove past acres of brush that he said hadn't been grazed since the National Park Service took it out of agricultural use in the late 1980s. What a shame. What a shame that wildlife might have something to use.
This is the Orwellian newspeak of choking a landscape with coyote brush, which is a native plant that doesn't choke anything. Coyote brush is landscape. And then, of course, the other disparaging term is brush. It's not a plant, it's brush. And that, these are carefully chosen words by a PR machine that demonizes wildlife. And then the last thing I wanted to say before, people, the layman, the average person drives into Point Reyes. I'm taking some new people out there soon, and I'm kind of waiting for it to be not so green. Or maybe I shouldn't, and take them out when they see green. People see green rolling hills like I did when I first moved here from New York. Like, oh, wow, how beautiful. It's like Ireland. It's beautiful in Point Reyes. And again, you are feeling the shame of Point Reyes, Sky, where I say this ad nauseum, and I'll keep saying it ad nauseum. It's as you call it, a monoculture, a moonscape, a golf course. The rolling green hills that we've been taught around here, and people come from far away and see and think is a wonderful landscape, is not a wonderful landscape. It's not healthy. It's more of a monoculture. It doesn't support wildlife. It dies, every year, and then has to grow back so it doesn't sequester carbon the way the native landscape does that is destroyed by cattle. So when you see green, I got to come up with a slogan. I see green, you should scream. Something like that, because it's not what people think. At least the green grass isn't. And there you go. And now you're showing a picture of what the cows actually do to the land, which is visible from June, July, August, September, October, November. It is a burnt dust bowl of mostly dirt with a little bit of grass left, and weeds and non-native plants, and just it's devastated by cattle. I even showed this to a group of people you were there, Jim, with the Marin Coalition, I should have spent just 10 minutes showing this one picture that Skylar's put up of a basically a dirty, sandy soil landscape at the coast, which has been destroyed by cattle, with cattle in the background, and just have a 10-minute conversation about this one picture to drill it into people's heads that this is a destroyed landscape, the result of cattle.
Coyote brush is all over the ranching area. It's in places that cows don't want to graze if they don't have to make the effort. It's on steeper slopes. It's in those areas. It's almost 100% coyote brush. But level areas, it basically doesn't exist, except a little bit of it in the elk. What was the elk reserve? I don't know if we need to keep calling it that, but up at Tamales Point, there is a little bit of that scattered with grass. It's grown in a little bit into the grassy areas that existed that were almost 100% back when ranching occurred up there at Pierce Point Ranch. So, thank God we've got coyote brush where we've got it, habitat for quail and brush rabbits and certain birds, certain sparrows depend on it. And the same thing, they say we don't want it to turn into a forest. Maybe not a forest 100%, but trees like oaks and willows along creeks and other trees like willows that grow in areas normally that are wet. We want those things. The trees provide shade and cooler water temperatures for aquatic life, including anadromous fish, which have been given the short end of the stick since ranching began out there, from Lagunitas Creek all the way down to places like Abbott's Creek that feeds into Abbott's Lagoon, all the anadromous streams that are not in decent shape at all because of ranching.
What's an anadromous stream for folks, Jim?
Well, that's for fish that migrate upstreams, live part of the time in the ocean, and then migrate into the streams, reproduce. And salmon die. I don't think steelhead, which are kind of a subspecies of rainbow trout, I don't know that they die. They may return to the ocean, I'm not sure. But mainly it's that they live in the ocean most of their lives and return to streams to lay eggs and create the next generation.
And those streams are polluted with cow manure.
Yeah, cow manure. Well, up the upper Lagunitas Creek, it's also probably from what do you call it? From houses that have septic tanks that aren't hooked up to any sewer system.
Right.
I want to point out two things about this picture, because there's a very brief period of time in the year in which you do have green, and it's, the shallow green, like a golf course, that the ranchers brag about, that, oh, look what we've provided. It's unnatural, first of all. That's not what's supposed to be there, and that's their biggest bragging point. And then that period ends, and you have various stages of invasive weeds and things that have been mowed down, commodity crops like the silage fields, and then you have this where things just don't seem to even be able to grow back anymore. Now, this used to be coyote brush. This used to be coastal grassland, prairie. This is what having a selfish, self-serving, private profit, we've chosen our lifestyle to be raising cattle. This is what that costs. This is what that does to the land. This is what you people, I shouldn't speak that way, sorry. This is what the public is being fed. This is what the public is being fed. And I get angry and say you people because you happily gobble it up without even being responsible enough to go and take a look for yourselves. Like debunking the lies is as easy as taking a look, and you're just happy to read the lies that are being printed without any check, without any vetting when it benefits the ranchers.
This is called, I think, abusing people's trust. Jocelyn, actually, North Carolina, I'm sorry who NC is. Can Jim comment on what kind of deals the government generally makes with ranchers for grazing on public lands? Is what's going on at Point Reyes, in other words, different somehow?
Well, that depends on what agency you're talking about. I mean, on Forest Service and BLM land, there's federal law that regulates and perpetuates grazing livestock on BLM lands and Forest Service lands. That's a big program. It's heavily subsidized. The ranchers pay it changes each year by pennies, maybe $1.35 or so today to graze a head of livestock for a month. Whereas in California, the average price throughout the state for grazing private land is $28 a head, not $1.35. And the Park Service at Point Reyes isn't much better than what Congress forces the taxpayers to absorb BLM and Forest Service lands. The Park Service is only charging $7.35, like for the new leases in Golden Gate NRA. And again, $7 versus $28. Park Service complains about not having money to manage trails and so forth, and laments that they just don't have the money. If they could charge for the grazing, and they'd have more money than they need to do things that they admit they need to do, but can't because they don't have the money. And with respect to the leases that have houses, those places in Golden Gate now are paying about 22 cents a square foot, when the average per square foot leasing in Marin for a house was in 2020 $3. And I recently looked and found that I went to Zillow, and they had like 150 houses for rent in Marin, and it was just Marin wide, from Stinson Beach and to Mill Valley, San Rafael, Novato, the whole 9 yards. And it's over $4 a square foot now. I saw some nice big places like in Stinson Beach and maybe Sausalito or whatever. It was like $10, $11 a square foot, and it's 22 cents for the ranches in Golden Gate. I mean,
That's
it's just
amazing.
absurd.
That's crazy.
And the Park Service is required by law to charge fair market value. Not only the Park Service, these are statutes that apply throughout the whole federal government. Can you imagine GSA having an extra building that the federal government doesn't want and charging 22 cents a square foot instead of the local price, which might be $3 or $4 a square foot? That would never fly.
So we saw the current superintendent of the park say that no, they don't need to charge fair market value. That statute you just mentioned does not apply to the National Park Service at Point Reyes, and you had an opinion about that.
Well, when we talked afterwards, I said I don't know where Ann Altman gets that, the superintendent. I don't know of any exception. I wish she would have specified what it was. I'd like to look at it. I looked into this a long time ago and found that there were laws that required federal agencies to charge fair market value. And that's just common sense. I mean, don't you think Congress, aside from what it's doing to perpetuate and make happy the ranchers that live in the public land states, there would be an investigation of any federal agency that's letting people charge 5 and 10 cents on the dollar. And you'd also wonder, and this was something in San Francisco not that long ago, a few years ago, where people that were involved in approving developments were getting kickbacks. And so you wonder, I mean, I don't have anything to support this, but I have to wonder, what is in it for the Park Service to be doing something like this? Giving away money that would otherwise be usable in the park, and to the extent there's surplusage over that, go into the federal treasury. It's just mind-blowing. I used to represent the Park Service, and I've just been so disappointed in the Park Service management at Point Reyes Seashore. It's just been I just can't figure out why they've done this. I know that they got pressure from Senator Feinstein when she was alive, and she was in a position to pressure them because of in the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. She had power over Interior's budget, but she's gone, and it's like they haven't changed. Congressman Huffman was sort of like her, but he's kind of changed. I don't think he had anything to do with the fact that the Park Service is charging 22 cents a square foot for these new leases in Golden Gate. I mean, that's aside from whether you have ranching. You should charge whatever the value of the land is, whether it's just grazing or grazing plus houses. And these ranches that do have houses, they all were dairies long, long ago, and dairying became less profitable than beef ranching, and that's why they were disappearing over the years. But there are all these places that have a house. They actually have 4 or 5, and the ranchers are renting the rest of them out, and they should be paying rent themselves, and they should be paying rent for every house that's rentable.
So I've been trying to say this. I want to backfill a little bit of what you just said. There was, in fact, a investigation, and there was released a PEER report, PEER, which is Public Employees for Environmental.
Oh yeah.
Responsibility.
Environmental responsibility. Thank you. PEER, and they did a report issued February 12th, 2024, if I have the date right. And I'm just abbreviating here. One ranch inside Point Reyes Seashore, H Ranch to be specific, has been leasing. This is for years. Over 1,000 acres, and this is on waterfront, Pacific Coast waterfront property, with 5 houses containing over 8,000 square feet of residential housing space, which they, as you point out, can and may have been, I don't know the details, renting to their tenant workers, which is technically illegal anyway, but we'll move on. 8,000 square feet, plus they get grazing rights for their approximately 200 head of cattle at the time. And all that, 1,000 acres for, guess how much do they rent that per month, folks, from the Park Service? $2,000 a month, which is less than I'd say a 1-bedroom goes for in San Francisco. Oh, and also and they pay no property tax. A pretty sweetheart deal if you can get it.
I want to talk about this a little bit, and I want to focus on the word discretion, because when the ranchers want to say, oh, you know, we're supposed to be continuing to ranch here. Well, they had that 1978 amendment that said at the park's discretion, they can do this and that. Well, the park also has the discretion of not charging these welfare rates. And even if they choose, if we're going to say that it's at their discretion, this is a park service that complains about not having funding, about being underfunded. You could solve that yourselves. And with that publication from Peer, they flat out called what Point Reyes National Seashore is doing illegal, and also pointed out that the administrative costs of having those leases out there costs the taxpayers more than those ranches bring in. And yet here we have the public saying, oh, we need the ranches. People, you are funding these operations, and they are millionaires are profiting extra because of this corruption, and you're supporting it because of the idea of, oh, poor ranchers,
and polluting the seashore.
Yeah.
So, you know, you remind me, this is, I mean, for me, I'm always looking for ways in and tactics. We should just be hammering away at this again and press the new superintendent, Ann Altman, to come up with a response to this. And if she doesn't, just keep hammering away and say, you know, I have no idea what's going on. I can only speculate that you're getting a kickback. I'm just speculating. I'm accusing you. What's going on? Why would you not charge fair market value? And to your point, Skylar, that press release I read from Peer said the title is Point Reyes Sweetheart Cattle Leases Are Illegal. Dairy and beef ranches on seashore pay far below market value. And Jim Coda here is saying they're required by statutes to charge fair market value. What the hey? And just keep pressing them on that point and pressing them on that point till they reveal the truth or change their policy.
After with the evidence that mounts up over the time, like I have a bunch of screenshots here of lease violations that the ranchers are guilty of. Some of them are really horrific, like corpse dumps, like where they just get rid of the baby cows that they don't want to even deal with. And I mean, that's a violation. They have barbed wire dumps. They have the dump that I showed in the picture. And as far as the public knows, they're not even ever punished for that. And then this apparently is also a violation by the Park Service not to be charging this. At what point does the public start saying, okay, wait a minute, there is some sort of a special relationship here that needs to be investigated?
Well, I don't have any more to say than I just did. I don't know why the Park Service doesn't charge what it's required to charge.
You had a wonderful.
That's something. Excuse me. That's something that the House Natural Resources Committee should look into.
You had a wonderful point last time we spoke about how the amount of waste being produced out there dwarfs the waste produced by humans in a big city.
Well, I did a calculation for the Coastal Commission about how much waste is emitted by the cows each year. I went by each ranch, and whether it's dairy or beef, it varies, and whether the dairy cows were heifers or dry cows or wet cows or bulls. And I came up with 79,000 tons of manure a year. And to put 79,000 tons into perspective or context, it's the weight of 2 U.S. aircraft carriers of World War II vintage, the USS Vinson, which is now a National Historic Site, docked in Alameda and available for public tours. In fact, Jack, I think you said you took a tour on the...
Not the Vinson, the Hornet.
Excuse me, the Hornet. Yeah.
We don't want to offend any World War II veterans here with the wrong ship.
Yeah, actually, that I had a lawsuit when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office about that. Some former Navy personnel sued the Navy about the fact that the Hornet was going to be scrapped in San Francisco Bay, and the suit was settled with the idea that the Hornet would become this National Historic Site. It would be saved, and so thanks to the efforts of those individuals, the USS Hornet still lives today.
I think Mark Harmon of NCIS was on that case. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm
Oh,
being a wise guy. I'm sorry, Jim. This is exactly why you said, Jack, I don't know if I want to go on your show with your mouth.
I'm going to start using the mute button.
I think I said also that it's the equal of what was it, 790,000 human beings at an average weight of 200 pounds. 790,000 human beings dropped on the land in the ranching area every year.
Yeah, that many people, the equivalent of the cows. By the way, Skyward, there's some, I don't know whether it's wind noise or rustling noise in your microphone. It's now and again, it's not constant, but just FYI. And Stephen Axelrod, thank you. Hi, Stephen, over in Switzerland. Has a reason for public consumption ever been given for the sweetheart deals? The short answer is no, because they don't even want to acknowledge them publicly. It's only as activists that keep making hay with this stuff and bring it to the public that it's an issue. And by the way, guys, I'm going to see Jared Huffman in 3 hours. He's doing a town hall here in Marin County with special guest Jamie Raskin, who I'm a big fan of. And you remind me, this is a great question to ask. What about the sweetheart deals? Can you press the Park Service on why they're continuing to give these under market value deals that are illegal? I can actually ask that question today if I'm, pushy like I am and get my voice in there.
And I just want to make sure people understand those horrifying numbers that Jim pointed out are in a national park, and all that manure has to go somewhere. And you can see where it goes. If you go out there, they liquefy it and then they spray it and then they dump the dry stuff on there. Or you have someone like Lunny who cleverly gets you, once again, the taxpayer, to pay him to start a new business of composting. So they're actually being rewarded for all of this waste. And then a lot of it just goes right out into the ocean or into the soil. And then they cleverly call it carbon farming. It's called saturating a national park in poop. But hey, let's call it carbon farming. I don't think you read Jocelyn Knight's question.
How do we get, so Jocelyn, hello, Jocelyn, how do we get results of the water quality testing we did that proved the pollution out in the world in a way that the public will understand? It's a great question. We had this data, activist and citizen funded independent water testing, surface water quality at Point Reyes Seashore showed basically lots of fecal indicator bacteria, enterococci, et cetera, E. coli, in the water of the streams of a national park, downstream of cattle ranches, especially dairies. And it's it's a narrative that's hard to get out to the public. You can say water pollution, but that's kind of vague and there's no picture with it. So great question, Jocelyn. Anybody have an answer?
Well, I'll only say that, when we did the water quality testing over 2 years, I think there was a press release about that, and it got a lot of play or consideration by the California Coastal Commission, and that also was in the news. So, I think we did about all one can to get out to the world the tremendous amount of manure that's produced at the seashore and in Golden Gate. But it's mainly, of course, dairies. They have a big problem in terms of the large amount of manure that's dumped at 1 or 2 or 3 times a year, versus beef cattle, which are just roaming around out there and pooping and peeing wherever they happen to be. But it's constant; they're always moving. It's one of the big problems that dairy ranches have, and why they're blinking out. In fact, I just remember now that Bill Nyman was quoted in the Santa Rosa Press Democrat months ago, something to the effect that, the dairies in the seashore don't have long to exist. He was just simply recognizing what people know, that dairies of that size here just have a limited time to exist. They're going down in numbers every year and have been doing so for since the 1800s.
And we're back to square one. We're back to square one where these guys were doomed anyway. They're being offered millions of dollars to escape from something that's doomed, and they're still complaining about it. And there's another route. There's an in-between. You can switch from dairy to beef, which isn't as bad, but it's still bad enough that even it isn't going to survive. And one more thing, Jack, the pollution, because you worked really hard on that and got a little bit of noise out there. All that the other side had to do was, once again, publish unvetted statements from the ranchers that said, oh, that was just those crazy people putting out nonsense, when in fact it was about as scientific as you can get. People should really be focusing on the fact that citizens had to do it instead of the Park Service themselves. But that's how easy it is. They vet us. Journalists vet us. They don't vet the ranchers. They can say
Yes.
whatever they want.
There's a built-in bias, and I do want to say just the Nyman thing drives me crazy, even with what you just said there. There's another layer to that, which is he's saying, well, the dairies are really, they're struggling and all. Well, the dairies have been propped up this whole time at Point Reyes Seashore specifically. If there weren't the price supports, taxpayer subsidies with cheap leases, they would have not been profitable and they would have had to leave. But isn't that also true? I'm asking you too about Nyman, whose cattle are also in Point Reyes Seashore. I don't know if exclusively there, but he's also got a sweetheart lease deal, and he'd have to pay much more if he wasn't getting this way under market value lease deal from the National Park Service on his GGNRA land, which is also run by the NPS, the Park Service. And his prices would go up dramatically, like 75, fourfold for the lease rates, and then he'd have to raise prices on his products. Is that not correct? He's also supported by the public.
Yeah, I think he's in Point Reyes, by the way, not GGNRA. And let me get back to what I said before about him saying that the ranches, the dairy ranches are dying out there. At the time of the settlement, the I Ranch had closed its dairy operation a few years before. The J Ranch had dropped its numbers from like 750 dairy cows down to about 75 by the time of the settlement. And the J Ranch had quit producing milk. Excuse me, not the J Ranch. The L Ranch had quit producing milk for a few years before the settlement. They just had heifers out there, which was mainly what the J Ranch Keogh had. Those three northern dairies of the six in Point Reyes Seashore had effectively quit operating a few years ago. There was, in fact, if it hadn't been for the settlement discussions, they may well have just closed up shop and left, or possibly done what the I Ranch did and converted to beef. But dairy ranching out there is just dead.
Meaning they hung in, Jim. That's a really important point. It just meaning they hung in there with just a few cows on the land so that they could maybe, which they did, get a payout from the settlement deal. Like they're not making any money. They're not making any money. They would leave. Let's stay so we can get a few $1 million payout again.
Yeah, well, that's the way it worked out. I don't know what their thinking was, but by staying and not really running as a business with any profit, they wound up getting whatever the TNC and they agreed to. Yeah.
And there's the other side of it. I mean, their deals are so good, Jack, that you almost can't afford to leave. Even if you're not running a business out there, I would pay what I Ranch is paying if you're going to let me have coastal property. I mean, I could afford what those ranchers are paying.
Well, as we've speculated, Schuyler, to your point, if you have 8,000 square feet of housing you could rent out to your workers, whatever you rent it out to them, and you pay them very little, you can literally make money only as an illegal landlord in the park as your rancher, not without even running your cows.
Well, not only renting to your ranch workers, but renting to people that don't have anything to do with working on the ranches out there. There's plenty of that going on right now. The I Ranch, Bob McClure said in the papers that he's got 30 people living there, but a couple of years before he shut down his dairy business and said his employees were all having to leave. So he's got 5 or 6 or 7 houses out there that he's collecting whatever amount of money rent from people that I'm sure far exceeds what he's paying the Park Service for his leasing the land for 180 beef cows or whatever it is he's now.
Gosh, I wish we had a Park Service attorney here who could tell. Oh, wait, we do. Jim, isn't that illegal?
Isn't it illegal? Well, we've talked about that at the beginning of the show. Of course, it's illegal to charge pennies on the dollar for a lease when you're required to charge fair market value by federal law.
And what about renting to non-employees?
Thank you.
That is prohibited. The Park Service has interpreted its arrangement in terms of leasing for ranching as not including leasing residences out there for people that are not employees.
I'm going to eagerly jump on this chance to crap on Bob McClure, because in 2021, the Point Reyes Light incorrectly reported that this legendary dairy was shutting its doors. He never left. It even said, oh, I'm going to go spend time with my wife in Petaluma or some crap like that. They never shut down. And then they had the sob story about how sad it was to have to kick out the families. You know, once again, the public is supposed to feel bad that this is a necessary thing happening, when in fact all he did was unnecessarily get rid of people that he pretends to care much about, and then replace those people with people that he could make a great bigger profit on. I mean, that's pretty bad.
But those ranchers that have residences, they would be making a tremendous profit under the Park Service leases, even if they didn't have any cattle out there to sell or milk to sell.
Well, when we fought the new proposed amendment, part of that amendment, what the ranchers wanted was to start all kinds of other businesses. It's funny, they're like, all we want is to hold on to historic dairying, but really what they were doing was wanting to bring in gift shops. They wanted to run Airbnbs. They were going to start new types of crops, new types of animal agriculture, everything that has nothing to do with the history of those dairies there. But just about any form of business that you try and run when you're paying nothing and no overhead, you can turn a profit on. So they're trying to profit in any way, shape, or form. And the Parks Service said, okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I think the GGNRA new leases for those, at least the ones with residences, of which there are 3, and then there are 4 with no residences. At least the ones with residences, as I recall, get to do things like that, although it requires some further approval of the Park Service. But they can have roadside stands and so forth and diversify to some extent.
There shouldn't be any private businesses in there at all, in my humble opinion. We have a question here that Skyward just put up from Corinne, a viewer. Are the numbers of dairies decreasing because there are fewer number, but they're getting larger, so that there are actually more dairy cows, but fewer smaller dairies? That's a tricky question, because there's the question about what's going on at Point Reyes, and then outside of Point Reyes with the dairying industry in effect. You guys want to take a stab at that?
Well, yeah, I'll say that the only if you want to make money and you're paying fair market value on everything that you need, and you've got to be gigantic, like 10,000 dairy cows, and 750 or 850 like the J Ranch and I Ranch had during the planning process. While it sounds like a lot of dairy cows, it's not enough if you're going to do whatever needs to be done to take care of methane and water pollution. And basically, it can't be done. You can't do that unless you're gigantic and away from streams, unlike Point Reyes and Golden Gate.
There's a huge marketing push, Corinne. That's a good question. There's a huge marketing push that makes it seem as though supporting Point Reyes ranchers or that sort of rancher is the same thing as stopping factory farms, really big factory farms. So like you said, hey, you know, these small farms are going away, but maybe the factory farms are having even more cattle. It might be true. Both of them are extremely destructive. It only takes a handful of cattle. I mean, forget the 700 or 100. It takes a handful of cattle to destroy the landscape. And I think that's the lie behind the grass-fed beef thing, and that's also a big marketing campaign. Jack, I was answering the question by saying part of this is marketing. Hey, prevent the factory farms by supporting these dairy ranchers, and in fact, almost to the extent of saying we are responsible for the success. We who don't eat animal products are responsible for the success of these factory farms because we aren't supporting these small dairy ranches.
So I'll catch holy hell from Leah if I don't talk about factory farms for a minute, since you opened that topic up, that is the whole other complete ruse that factory farms are bad and small family farms are good. That is utter nonsense. It's actually the opposite of what's true. It's the opposite of what's true, because if you put more smaller farms out there grazing more land and eating more grass, it produces more methane, it degrades more land, it pushes more wildlife out. I prefer factory farms. Of course, they're all horrific. Uh-oh. I drove Skylar away. He's messing with something. But the big factory farms that people see down in Bakersfield off Route 5, Jim, those are actually more efficient. It's like the way you house humans in apartment buildings in New York City is more efficient than putting one person per house in 1 acre of land. So the whole regenerative ranching and small family farms mythology is utter nonsense. It might be a tad less brutal for a cow to eat, hang out in a grass field more of the time and then be slaughtered and then have the babies taken away to take the milk in the dairy business, which is horrifically cruel. If I went into how cruel it was, people would tune out. But the whole mythology that factory farming is the problem and small family farms are the answer is complete nonsense. And I write extensively about this on my True Spirit website. So I don't know. I know you're not into the anti-ranching knocking thing that I do, Jim, but certainly at Point Reyes, were those even small dairies or were they over 700? So they were considered CAFOs in Point Reyes Seashore, which are touted as small family farms.
Yeah, well, you can define. I mean, people define small family farms differently. They'll say 10,000 is the beginning of not being a family farm, probably.
And what does a family farm mean? That's more nonsense. Family, Purdue is a family chicken business.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, it's just the marketing is so dense and so deep and so in our culture. It's really hard to remember what the truth is because we've got this fog of disinformation, a family farm. As I was just saying, Skylar, Purdue Chickens, it's a family chicken farm. It just doesn't mean anything.
I was going to tell you, we've even reached the point I'm seeing ads sent to me about family oil businesses. Support these family oil businesses in South Dakota. Oh, man. Everything, you can put the word family on just about everything, everyone. And by the way, I don't know any families that aren't multi-generational.
Jim, do you have any, we are, not that it matters, but we're 10:08, so we're a little over an hour today. Is there, as we're blabbing here, is there anything more you would like to add? And if you can think of it, jump in.
No, I don't think so. I think we've gone all over the place and covered a lot of things.
Welcome to our ride.
We'll save some for next time.
No, I think I can't think of anything extra I'd like to add at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone who tuned in. And Sledge, I know that you're excited that you had a victory in protecting some trees, and we'll get back to the tree topic in a future episode. But I do see that you had that happy news. We'll talk about it maybe next week. But yes, we do recognize what happened. Jim, thrilled that you chose to give us your time, and everyone who watched and learned by having Jim on. Remember, I've got a Jack, the list of credentials that you gave for Jack was Jim quite long, but Jim is not just an opinionated, passionate wildlife lover, or in our cases, a vegan. This is a retired environmental attorney who has experience with Point Reyes National Seashore, with the Bureau of Land Management. He actually appeared in The Shame of Point Reyes, helping people understand the legislative process that went on. So it's a treasure to have Jim here, and we actually hope that we can have Jim on again in the future.
Thank you very much, guys. Enjoyed it.
I'm glad you survived us, Jim. Thank you. Not all do. We've had to carry some people out on stretchers when they hear my mouth running, and then Skylar jumps in to interject and say even less or more. And this, by the way, this little housekeeping, please, this show is being recorded and will be put on Skylar's Watching Humans YouTube channel. Please share it. Please like it. As everyone says for podcasting now, it helps the algorithm. So more people will see this show and know it exists every Tuesday, 9 a.m. We've only missed one in, half a year now because of some technical glitch. And thank you for our audience for tuning in. Thank you, Jim, again. I'm going to add my thanks to you for coming in and giving us any information. We will be doing more shows in this issue because it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, even though it looks like some of the ranches are already, in fact, leaving the seashore. So it's moving forward, even as some of the ranchers want to try to stop the deal, which is already happening. Right?